Agenda is to put people next to me.
All right, there you go.
All right, so a roll call. Me. Helicopter Subcommittee Chair, Dr. Larson.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Bon Secours, Dr. Lino. Catskill, or Garnet Catskill, Dr. DeCusser. McKinley. Good Sam. Dr. Acapedi. Oh, I think they switched, but we'll get that after. Hudson Valley. Health Alliance,
Here.
Dr. Brock. Northern Duchess, Templeton. Nyack. Scala, Raybridge. Garnett, Dr. Mage. Rowntree, Spano. No. Putnam, Dr. Rodriguez.
President.
St. Anthony's, Dr. Breville. St. Luke's.
Here. Hard.
Sharon, Dr. Santos. Vassar, Dr. Fleece, Dr. Wolf. Westchester, Dr. Kakuza. Dr. Larson for REMAC Liaison. And Karen. All right. That gives us a quorum.
Thank you.
So, old minutes, review the minutes. Everybody have a chance? We have a motion to accept the minutes. Second.
Second.
All right, old business. Supraglottic pilot program update.
Yeah, so the state is just about 30 days, maybe 45 days away from getting the policy out. Once that happens, it should be all ready to go. They moved it from iGel to supraglottic airway if trained, equipped, and regionally approved. And so the regional approval process, this body can decide, do you want to use any type of SGA? Do you want to use just the iGel? Like, it's up to this body to decide what kind of SGA we could use, or all of them, or none of them. So that's where that is going, and then it will officially be off the hands of the Hudson Valley region to collect and interpret data.
It's pretty amazing.
Karen is thankful.
45 days it'll be, it's
Hopefully,
been a massive project.
Yeah.
So the question then is, you know, I guess we define what the supraglottic airway devices that are allowed to be used.
Mm-hmm.
It was always, the whole thing was done with the iGel, right? I don't know, are there any other gel-filled LMAs? Which is basically what the iGel is. I don't think there's any competitors. The question is, do we just have LMA, like in general, for the air-filled? I feel like there was, well, we don't really know whether there's a benefit to a gel-filled. I mean, you guys played with them, right? Like, the iGel it goes in materially different. At least, I don't know, like a regular LMA is pretty easy to use in the same manner, but there's something about the weight of you guys know what I'm talking about? Like, it goes in much easier. And so, expanding it, we haven't actually done any studies on a regular LMA.
There's some pretty decent studies out there to take a look at if you all want to. The iGel is on the top of most of them. There's a couple new ones that are out there. Rich, you probably are more familiar with those than most.
I mean, only use the iGel. And previously, on aeromedical side, we just used the, well, we're starting to get used to it.
iGel is a proprietary device.
By intersurgical, correct.
Right. And an LMA describes like a type of device made by multiple companies.
Correct. So
Does
you could-
Agile want to give us a lot of money?
Agile would not
Welcome
give
to
us
the
a lot of
Agile
Agile
REMAC.
to do this program, so I tried that.
We're changing the name from Hudson Valley to
Yeah.
Agile Emporium.
I'll wear the Agile shirt.
Yeah, right.
So that being said, I mean, I think the iGel is a superior product in a way, and that's anecdotal, obviously, because I don't have anything to say that. Just like using it, it just feels like it goes in easier. So we could either just keep it as, you know, you can use an LMA or you know any supraglottic airway of your choice. I mean, there are others too.
Yeah, or you could call it a
Gel-filled.
supraglottic airway with blah, 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 you know, whatever.
If we make the term gel-filled supraglottic airway, then any competitor that comes out once their patent expires, you know, it could be part of this. But I really think it is a good product. So I don't know. It's up to you.
Well,
What
right
we
now
want
we
to
have
do.
a lot of really good data with the iGel itself, and I don't think we have a tremendous amount of comparable data with comparable devices. So what might be a good idea would be to approve, you know, the iGel, but leave the door open, and if anyone wants to promote a similar product, they can bring it to us, and if they have data that shows good comparison, we'll be open to additional products in the future. But we've got to be data driven. We have, you know, you have to bring us something that shows that this is at least comparable or superior.
I agree.
Fabulous.
So, do we have a motion to call it in our Hudson Valley region a gel-filled?
I think you could just do it, Mark.
Device.
I think, you know, just decide on that's what
Vote.
you're gonna do.
Anyway, any objections? I'm so bad at Robert's Rule of Order. I forget what there's a term when everybody just says.
I wouldn't admit that on a public forum.
Getting better. All right.
As the chair, right?
It's okay.
So, just, can you just review the time sequence again for, you know, for rolling us out completely?
45 days.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the new protocols were approved in December.
Okay.
They, according to the state, should be on the website within the next week or so with a change log to show what changes are from previous to this, with an implementation date by July 1st of 2025. And so people have until July 1st to get onto the programs. You have to be on them by July 1st. And so as soon as this policy statement comes out from the state, anybody around the state will be able to then do their own iGel program through their own region and not have to do it through the Hudson Valley. Until that comes out, people still have to follow this pilot project through the Hudson Valley and doing all the different things about it. One change might very well be that right now, everybody has to do all of the BLS adjuncts, which include the EpiPen, EKG transmission, CPAP, albuterol, you know, all those different things. I don't know if that's gonna be a part of it moving forward, that they'll have to do all of those things. That might be, I don't know. July 1st is the deadline to have things done by. As soon as the policy statement comes out, folks will be able to apply as they would through the state
okay.
and the region.
All right. Moving along. Service upgrades. Soup Angels pad as of January 22nd. Otisville Fire Department CPAP as of February 22nd, and Monroe Community Ambulance 12 lead. Those are the service upgrades. Evaluation Subcommittee report. Dr. Felice.
Nothing crazy. I think we could continue to follow with Dr. Templeton on a case with his agency that has been kicked back for internal remediation. You want to talk about it, or?
I can give a brief overview.
Briefly, yes. This is your medic.
We had one medic that had a number of cases that came up, but two of the cases specifically had to do with identification of a dystrophy and appropriate treatment. They were tough cases. They were wide complex tachycardias with a pretty high rate. And just in summary overview, SVT was the diagnosis, but it was not appropriate. And so, of course, the treatment didn't necessarily harm the patient in those those cases, but it was not recognized. And so anyway, there have been a number of conversations with that medic, and I am looking for a reasonable dysrhythmia education piece. It's harder to find than you think. I did find some nice emergency medicine CME papers on tachydysrhythmias, but they're pretty in-depth. I mean, it's MD level stuff, right? So we could use that. I got a website just the other day that I might be able to use to find a good educational direction for that. However, the medic realizes, has been in contact with other cases that have come up since then where there were tachydysrhythmias and seems to be functioning well and practicing well. So it took a lot of discussion, but I think we got to where we need to get.
And we've got one more case that Mark is aware of and one I'm going to surprise him with later today.
Great.
To review. I want to actually point out that Tammy's been doing a great job in her new role.
Yes.
And despite being about as pregnant as somebody can get, continues to be an excellent resource. And we want to be a resource for the different agencies. If you guys have complicated cases, I just want to do the best for our patients. So just send them our way and we'll do our best to help you guys out.
Both of you guys were excellent on those discussions. So I thought that was great to listen to, participate in a little bit. All right, New York State DOH enforcement notifications. All right, so we have a couple from our area, actually. Ronald Jocko Jr. Assessed a civil penalty of $2,000 for Part 800 violation. It's medic in our region. It was now removed. Ariana Mortensen also was credentialed in our region. That's a $2,000 civil penalty, which was stayed in a 3-year probationary period for Part 800. Empress Ambulance got a $20,000 fine for Part 800. Lindale Brunson of Elmont, New York, $2,000 fine, Part 800 violation. James Kozak of Oakdale, New York, $2,000 fine, Part 800 violation. Ryan Morgan of Pleasantville, New York, $1,000 civil penalty, probation for 3 years, suspension is stayed for Part 800 violation. That's it. Seemed like a longer list. Oh, sorry. Ronald Jocko Jr. from Hyde Park, suspended for 1 year effective 2/27/25, and mandated to complete a full paramedic refresher in addition to his fine. All right. Helicopter committee report.
So we met this morning, and we completed the aeromedical services guidelines, which were first published in 2007 and updated periodically over the years. One thing we took out of them was this receiving hospital chart, which described the capabilities of each hospital, because honestly, we weren't updating this in real time, and it's now available on Muru if you, or hospitals update the state. And so instead of having something that isn't real time from years ago, we're eliminating this. Everyone here should make sure their hospitals are updating the state so that we can then look on Muru on one of these and see if we need to, in real moment, to see which hospital can do what. Go Bills. Go Bills. Go Bills. Go Bills.
All right. RTAC. Is there?
Yeah, there's an upcoming meeting. I was just trying to pull up the date. The meeting has been set for RTAC, and the last meeting was on Zoom. I was not able to attend, so I can't give you a date. I don't know if anyone else was there.
I feel like if there was something major, probably would have been involved.
Monday, March 31st.
That's the next one. Where is it?
It's at Garnet Health, Middletown.
Okay. QI.
So we've been reevaluating all of our local agencies in the area and realizing that a lot of their QA/QI plans have been not updated within the 5 years that the region requires. So we've reached out to a lot of them and asked them to update their plans. While reviewing that, we've also noticed our regional guidelines are out of, they're a little old. But
It's a
to
new
change,
business.
yeah, to make some changes though, it's going to take us a little bit. We have to make sure that we stay in with Article 30, the Section 300A and 3006, and we have a new Part R coming out, which will also cause a lot of changes to what we can put into our guidelines, while still making sure that we follow our regional deliverables that we have to give to the state. So Dave Violante, Rob Zealy have both reached out to me. We're going to start reviewing them. It's going to take us a little bit because we want to wait for all the new policies to come out before we can start making changes to our regional area.
We'll talk about it more in new business. It's on the agenda. Alrighty. Protocol committee.
Protocol committee's been busy, as we always are. And I know under new business, there's the final vote for the RSI update, I believe. The focus of that was it started, 5 years ago with the question of how do you become an RSI instructor? And now with a lot of Rich's help, there's been an entire rebuilding of the curriculum, standards for how to become an RSI instructor, but also a streamlining of the yearly credentialing process for refreshers and new RSI providers. But we can talk about that more later. Other than that, we've also started looking at some old policies to make sure they're in line with the collaborative protocol, specifically the termination advisory that went out a few years ago from the REMAC. But we just brought that up at the last meeting, so more on that will come in the future.
It is an interesting contradiction, though. The more you read,
Yeah.
you're like, the issue being, do paramedics declare people dead, pronounce people dead?
I didn't have a chance to call Michael yet, but I was going to pick it today.
It's on my to-do list too. So the issue is that we came out with an advisory many years ago, like 5-ish,
2018.
saying that EMS providers don't pronounce, they terminate resuscitation, because there were some issues regarding county lines in which, I don't remember the exact specifics, and that was one of the issues that when we were discussing this, but when a paramedic, if they pronounce somebody, they would end up they couldn't bring the body to a hospital once they're pronounced, because you then are transporting a dead body as opposed to somebody that was getting resuscitation in which the decision is made to stop efforts, but could still transport. And so then they were getting stuck waiting hours for the medical examiner to come, and the crew can't leave because they're stuck with the body. So we came out with this policy, and I believe that's the reason, but there may be one or two other things that said that. But it actually contradicts what the state says, which is the most, in one document I was reading, it said, I think the most common scenario is of people that pronounce that are not doctors are EMS providers, and that's from New York State. So apparently we do pronounce, and so we need to look into that issue more, and then come up with some revision of our prior policy or statement that we came out with.
From my reading of it, anyone can pronounce death.
Yeah.
It doesn't even expect that an individual has any sort of training or medical anything in order to pronounce death. And so I don't think it prohibits the region from saying we do not expect our pre-hospital providers to pronounce death. So other states have it differently, like where I live in New Jersey, a physician or an associate practitioner has to pronounce death. And so, so that means calling to speak to a person on medical control or waiting for a medical examiner to then pronounce death. So.
Yeah, I think the discrepancy in New York is they differentiate pronouncing and certifying. Like we certify, when you guys do the death certificate on Dalve, you're certifying the death, and funeral directors can certify deaths, and medical examiners. but no one else does that. You know, whereas pronouncing, you know, one person says this person's dead, the other certifies it. But more to come on that as we
You say
go
those
through
words
the
with
issue.
When the question was brought to us, it actually was brought up as a data question, not as an actual legal question. Because I read the law the same way, like, basically any layperson can do it as well. But the state PCR guidelines specifically state who pronounces at the scene. So if our advisory says the paramedic can't and the EMS can't, what happens for an agency that straddles multiple regions?
We also investigated this in our service, air medical, because we're in the middle of transport and the person may die. Do you pronounce death in the air? And the answer is no, because then whose jurisdiction
Right.
are you under? And then
We all know.
do you continue to where you're going, or do you go back? And different regions have it differently. The Hudson Mohawk region, Remo, says you turn around and go back to the hospital if it's an interfacility transport, because that physician is the one that is legally responsible for the patient during transport. So you turn around and go back to that doctor.
And I
If
think
you're
that's
in,
what the
if you're in
advisory says,
between
right?
hospitals, so.
Yeah.
But that's their directive in that region, so we can,
Does that mean you're obligated to continue resuscitation efforts during flight?
no, you can do termination of resuscitation efforts, or a TOR or a TRE, depending on which state
So
you're in.
that's very similar to the.
Yeah, what we have.
that we have, yeah.
So
Technically-
that's fine, I don't believe you would have to change it. You would just then have to give subsequent guidance of now where do you go? Now, if it's a 911 call, you're going to the hospital because that has a morgue and therefore a legally appropriate place to have the body until the rest of the process ensues. But if you're on an interfacility transport, you might want to give some guidance as to, do you turn around or do you keep going? And, I mean, my recommendation would be to keep going to the destination facility, destination hospital, because they're all hospitals, and not going to like dialysis in this case.
Well,
But
nursing
then,
homes.
but then that's,
Yeah, this
that's
is-
an exception. What if you're coming from home, going to dialysis, and the person dies in an ambulance? Where do you bring that patient's body?
We're getting in the weeds there.
Well, you are, but that's the other, that's the thing, is
Yeah.
most places are hospital destinations for transport.
Right.
But there are other non-hospital destination transports
Yeah.
that you might have to give some guidance for.
The other common scenario would be transferring someone from the emergency room back to the nursing home if they expire en route. Do you continue on to the nursing home and drop the dead body off? Or do you,
We have, well, the policy currently states that if somebody expires on the way from a nursing home, and has a DNR, or, you know, I think, now I can't remember whether they have a DNR or not, but, the policy says go back to the nursing home.
What do you do in reverse? Go back to the emergency room?
Yeah.
Depends if you're
Seemingly,
halfway or
yeah.
not.
Yeah. So you can see how this is like an area with a lot of questions and more debate to come. So we want to figure out how to come to terms with the state's verbiage and our own. So we'll discuss that more at the protocol committee and then come back with you guys. Just what we come up with. Anything else?
Unless there's questions about the RSI process, then no.
Westchester REMAC?
Not a whole lot to report. A number of agencies have taken up the, or applied for the iGel, and so that's happening. And I think there's some interest, the word's getting out. So I think there's gonna be a fair amount of interest there. You know, one thing I will talk about, because we've had fairly extensive discussions about this, and that is that, you know, Westchester used to be part of the Hudson Valley. And this was a number of years ago. Some of the folks in this room were present for those discussions and debates and so on. But it was quite a while ago. And the Westchester split off from the Hudson Valley, and their primary rationale was that, you know, there was a million people in Westchester. It was much more of a suburban, urban environment. You're always within half an hour transport time to any hospital. And that we had the equivalent population that the other 6 counties had. So it was felt for a variety of reasons that we should split. At the time, I wasn't a new member of sort of the EMS community, but I was, you know, sort of new, and there was a lot of other players there. I wasn't really a big fan of doing this.
You weren't new when they split? What year did they split?
Well, I wasn't new, but I wasn't in a position of power.
Not that you're that old. But I was around.
Right,
and I
but
wasn't around when
I
they split.
wasn't, you know, and so it's, like I said, I wasn't in a position of power.
In the record, it says you're not that old.
And so anyway, the split went ahead, and it was approved by the state and so on and so forth. And so Hudson Valley reached out to us and, you know, with a possible proposal to, you know, come back together. And so probably there was not, I think the Hudson Valley region was, in favor of doing it, and there were certainly some benefits for them to do it. But the, like I said, I still have very mixed feelings about it, but I feel that certainly the Westchester folks felt that they wanted to keep things as they were. And be a separate region. However, and I pushed it a number, is we wanted to try to reach out and be as much help to this region as possible in terms of doing things, you know, like some of the stuff that we're doing already, the credentialing of paramedics and so on and so forth. So whatever programs could be worked on together, and wherever we could lend support, you know, we would try to do that. But, and I think the sort of re-merging discussion is, you know, not happening. So, anyway, that's kind of the way it is. And, you know, it's sort of like, well, you know, trying to look at the big picture, what's the big, you know, in terms of what is the overall benefit for the EMS system. You know, I'm not, you know, to me, sort of the bigger and more united we are, the stronger we are. So, anyway, I have some mixed feelings. Dr. McGurty was part of that conversation. Maybe you have any?
No, I think you summed it up exactly correct. Just that there's not an appetite to reconnect the regions, but to work on projects together and to try to work together in unison for goals that are mutual was what they wanted to perform.
For what it's worth, we do have a pretty collaborative relationship. It's pretty good with the, you know, I don't know of other, how other REMSCOs interact with other REMSCOs in other parts of the state, but between Westchester and the Hudson Valley, it's a pretty close relationship and works well. I think, do you want to touch on the program agency, the real reason why this came about?
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dave Grass. I'm the chair of the REMSCO. So as you're aware, there's an empty hole inside the table here of our executive director, Bill Hughes, who served us well for almost 18 years. He had the audacity to tenure his retirement and wants to move on to his second retirement effective March 1st. So as we started sitting down and strategically planning where do we take the program agency over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, we didn't want to just have a knee-jerk reaction of let's advertise, refill, and as so eloquently put the other day, wash, rinse, repeat. So we wanted to look at where is the future of EMS. And that led to some really good discussions. And essentially, one of the things that was brought out of that discussion was there is a huge push for any of you that have had an opportunity to sit through the CMAC and SEMSCO meetings of the Bureau wanting to consolidate program agencies and regions. There was a hard push about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, to reduce it from the current number of 13 down to 6. That met some resistance. Then they started talking about, would it make more sense to go with the economic development zones? So that's where the thought process of, well, is it time for us to look at the future, see where the state is looking to take these program agencies and REMSCOs and turn them into economic business development zones? So when we did our homework and looked at what's the Hudson Valley's economic business development zone, well, it's all 6 of our counties plus Westchester. So, and ironically, their office happens to be next door. So it was an easy discussion of, how do we put it together? So our first thought was, let's pitch the idea. I understand, and again, to Dr. Larson's credit and mine as well, I was not sitting on the council nor made those decisions when the split happened, but understand the logic. There were nuances of regional protocols that went through there that caused, the more urban areas to be far different from the very rural areas as far as protocols and go. And as we discussed it in our team, well, that has kind of gone away, right? Once we went to the collaborative protocols, we're all operating under the same protocols. I mean, outside of New York City, whether you're going from Nassau and Suffolk to Niagara, we're all operating on the same protocols with just some very minor tweak nuances of where it goes. So did it make sense for us to do that? I said it makes sense to do it. We had a great conversation with Brett and Jim down in Westchester, and we said, pitch it. What do we got to lose? When they came back with their correspondence of thank you but no thank you, there was no hard feelings, but at least we felt as the REMSCO, we investigated possibilities of things that may very well could be in 5 years or 8 years or 10 years that we have no choice but to all come together again. And we'll go down that road when it comes. But that was the impetus behind those conversations and going back to it is how do we form a coalition where we're stronger and have one voice, especially when we want to go to Albany and push an agenda, whether it's an IGEL program or whatever. The more people we have in the room saying the exact same things, the better the alternatives are that come out to that. So that really led to that. It kind of dovetails back. We're still, as the REMSCO, investigating where we're going to go with the program agency. There's a lot of discussions on the table. But what we have identified, and it's by sheer funding, and for those of you that don't understand, I'll be happy to have a sidebar conversation. But in 25 years, there's been 0 increase to the program agency funding. We've had no choice but to cut services to be able to maintain what it is we were doing at the root and core. I.e., for those of you that remember, we had a very robust education department and we had a very robust QI department and, all the services that we were able to offer we could do. But through time and the fact that cost of living raises need to be kept and the rent of this building and the utilities and the electric, everything goes up 3 to 7% every year, and our funding went up 0. You can imagine that at the end of the day, our checkbook was running right to the point where we just couldn't be sustainable. So we're looking at multiple different options now, everything from subcontracting the program agency out to another facility, to a not-for-profit where we could put it through. Because again, we're looking at what are the options for a sustainable future, not just let's fix it today, kick the can down the road and make it somebody else's problem. So,
and
just to give context.
There is precedent for, subcontracting
Yes.
out the program agencies. Some of the other regions, University of Rochester, the
Right,
institution acts as the subcontractor for their region, and other academic places do. There's also some educational companies or not-for-profits in the area that potentially would be interested in doing this. So this is something that's being explored as a way to, keep things afloat essentially.
Right. But a sustainable future,
Yeah.
not just, because we realize that if the funding sources continue the way they are and there's no built-in increases every year, it's just not sustainable. Whether you want to amortize it out 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, the math just doesn't work. So we're trying to figure out what's sustainable over a long period of time. So more to come. That's where we're at on that side of it.
But if you guys know of an executive director looking for a job that wants to work on the cheap. All right.
Absolutely.
Let us know.
Yeah,
CMAC.
just, one more word on that, just that, I think Westchester has had a little bit of the luxury of having, there is the Department of Emergency Services in Westchester County. And so there's been, resources from the Department of Emergency Services that have been lent essentially to, or been, EMS has been able to incorporate into that. And so, we haven't felt as pinched.
They have grant funding from the county, essentially.
So, anyway, so that's one of the differences. I think if we were off on our own, we may have never made that decision to begin with, years ago.
I'm curious, as
Yes,
the Bureau becomes a division, and there's new hiring, will that influence how money is available to the regions?
Well,
And-
there's-
And if the EMS system in crisis suggestion to have counties take over, in a sense, at least some part of the oversight of EMS in their regions, in their counties rather?
So that'll be the operational side of EMS inside those individual counties. There's no regulatory piece to say that counties have to fund the regions, but there is statute that says there has to be a REMAC, and there is statute that says there has to be a REMSCO. So those funding sources come directly out of the state. We've been told that there's an increase coming to our budgets. It's about $35,000, but please understand, we're now, since June of 2024, out of contract, which means that we've had zero funding since June of 2024. And if we don't see those contracts get executed shortly, we're going to start to run low on cash in the REMSCO as far as the program agency side of it, and that's to pay the rent and the things. Again, as early as last week, and David will sure will touch base on some of the happenings that happened last week at state meetings. We've been assured that this is moving through the process and it's out of the Bureau's hands, but it's still caught up in red tape, and we're now probably close to 8, almost 9 months into no contracts being executed for, the first and second quarters of the 24-25 season. And without an outside funding source, anybody that's ever tried to balance a checkbook with no paycheck knows that the savings is running out quickly.
I was just curious, if there's gonna be funds to fund counties or expect counties to help fund EMS.
I've
would
read
that come to
nowhere
the
where-
agency, or if you designate EMS as an essential service, would that identify a new funding stream from those state monies?
Unfortunately,
I
there's
have not
been
heard for the
incredible
program
resistance to that.
Right, because it'll be taxpayer money being spent on EMS. and
Hopefully.
That has hundreds of thousands of individual politicians and their locales not wanting to answer why their taxes are going up for EMS somewhere else. But that's not in that.
Not that I've read anywhere in any of the literature.
We'll be having these meetings at the various stations of ambulances, like we used to a long time ago.
Yes, sir.
What's the worst case scenario 6 months from now?
6 months from now, we'll be out of money and have to furlough the program agency staff.
And what does that mean on the ground?
That means that none of your background work will be done unless you do it.
Who does it?
You.
Your agencies.
Yeah.
REMAC would have to do their own work, all of the background information that goes on, all of the background work that gets done by the REMSCO
Yeah.
that the program agency assumes. Transfer of authority, CON actions. Those all now fall back to the REMAC and REMSCOs. It's a scary proposition of where this could go, and there was a passionate speech given at, was it CMAC or SEMSCO? From one of the regions. They could not send delegates to the state meeting because they're already out of money. Now, we have been financially, fiscally responsible is the word, I wanted to use another term. So we're okay for a little while, but in full disclosure, we had a failure here inside the program agency last week of our firewall. And within 24 hours of that firewall going down, one of our computers was ransomware, and it was froze. So when we brought in the IT company to start figuring out what happened, how to fix it, and where to go, we were able to rebuild the firewall and get that back up and running. But because we don't know if there's software laying dormant that could be reactivated in a month or a year from now, we had to take 4 computers and trash them and order new ones. And none of that was budgeted. So we're even harder robbing Peter to pay Paul.
At some point, should we be writing our state representatives, or do you need some advocacy, or?
I mean, this is ongoing, this has been going on forever.
This has been
You know,
going
it's
on
a-
since,
it's a-
because normally our
I mean, yes.
contracts,
Yeah,
they should be
should,
new.
but-
Tell me to write someone, I'll write one.
The logic behind it, from what we understand, is the holdup has been because historically we always had 1-year contracts. This contract period will be 5 years. So the good part about it is, once the contract's signed, it's good for 5 years. We still have a quarterly reporting tool that has to be utilized every quarter to report finances and funding and reimbursement. Because always remember that the way that the program agency works, it's for a reimbursement process only. You have to spend the money to get the money back. To spend the money to get the money back, you have to first have the money. So it's a trickle-down effect that we're going through. So again, in Bill's defense, him and I have had several conversations about, do we need this and can we afford it, because we didn't want to touch it. And we spent a great deal of time, what do we do with these computers? Well, short of asking Karen to write things by hand again and talk to people over the phone only, we had no choice but to make these expenditures. And we're gonna have to figure out how to get reimbursed for them later. So
I just apologize, I'm kind of new to this, but Dr. Rodriguez brought up the question, what is our advocacy resources in Albany? Do we have any? Do we have a liaison? Do we have, what's our contact?
So one of the difficult pieces that we have is the REMSCO, and I believe you as a REMAC, by statute, you are not allowed to directly lobby the state or a senator for them. You can do it personally, your facilities can lobby, but as the REMAC as a whole, you don't have the ability to be able to lobby senators or legislators or congresspeople for something to be passed, because you're a statute agency. It's the same thing with the REMSCO. We can't walk up the street and go into our congressman's office and say, you know, we need to do this or it's gonna implode. We have to do it through the agencies and the organizations. So there's catch-22s in the law.
I can go in a different capacity and say this is an important.
You could go in as St. Luke's Hospital and absolutely lobby your congressman all day long. Individually, absolutely. But as the REMAC body, you're not allowed to lobby. And we're not allowed to lobby as a REMAC.
Can we contact Ryan Greenberg as someone that has a presence in Albany?
I believe that you can contact Ryan Greenberg, or Director Greenberg, and he will empathize with your plight as much as he can, understanding
Can't make the money.
it's out of his hand in another state agency's hands, and his hands are locked.
So, you know, I'm part of the Westchester EMS Advisory Board. Okay, so this is an official Westchester advisory board on EMS. And so we have been in contact with Senator Shelley Mayer, who's been a strong advocate of EMS, and for a while. And so we've done a lot of, we're doing a lot of work through her, and, certainly, sort of following what's going on in Albany and so on and so forth. But anyway, that's, sort of the avenue that we have taken as an advocacy in Westchester.
So,
For what it's worth.
Again, I'm brand new at this, but I've been ASAP at the state level and at the
careful,
national
you'll get
level.
voluntold for something.
What's that?
So be careful, you'll get voluntold for something.
Oh, I know. I've been failing upwards since I started this job. But I think this is something that, based on what you said, Eric, I think there's a lot of overlapping pieces of this Venn diagram where a lot of people would have a lot invested in making sure that we have a robust system here. Has ASAP been recruited in for this? Because I think this would be their bailiwick of the wazoo. They would love to take this to Albany every year until someone listens.
Pretty sure NAEMSP is involved actively, because they're involved at every CMAC.
Do they have a state chapter? Is there any EMSP in New York State chapter?
There's,
Yeah.
oh, well,
I do know that there are organizations that are actively pushing this, whether it's the United New York Ambulance Network, which is made up of commercial services, whether it's Nice Vera, New York State Volunteer
Yeah.
Organizers Association.
Imagine even Ginny would have something to do.
Fire Chiefs Association has taken it up. Everybody's affected this across the state. It's not something that's unique here to the Hudson Valley. This is a statewide problem, difficulty, and everybody's pushing as hard as they can. But we can only push on New York State Bureau of EMS, who tell us it's out of our hands. It's off through the approval process through.
So in the interim, we're exploring various options and things that we can potentially do to sort of offset the lack of funding that has or the lack of increase in funding that is sort of acutely making it difficult to get an executive director. But
so just on the, going back to the ASAP thing, so, there's New York ASAP. So, and I've never been very active at all in New York ASAP. I've been active in the national. But they must have, an EMS group
They do.
in there, and that would be, and just like the national does, that could be an advocacy, and I don't know, what could be done through them.
Our leadership in ASAP for the past several years, Jeff Raybridge, Jeremy Cushman,
Yeah.
big EMS advocates.
Yeah.
But I think from what you're describing, just from a strategic perspective, there's a lot of different tribes we can put in to coordinate. I think there, from a, again, strategy perspective, a lot of moving parts, but we can make this a broad front issue and get a lot of people who have something at stake in this coming together. But that's a lot of work and effort. So I'm happy to talk about it and volunteer.
noted.
To look into this. But then your time frame is really narrow, 6 months, that's not much time at all.
Well, we'll be a year out of no funds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, because of the way the structure is, it's not where we can keep a large reserve of cash flow on there. So,
since we've invested in Bitcoin, it swings.
How many pizza parties do we need?
So we should move along though, just because we have a couple more things on the agenda. New business. So the first item.
You wanna do the CMAC real quick?
Oh, I'm sorry. Somehow I circled it so many times I didn't see it. I didn't. Would you like to give the CMAC report?
Not really, but I will. All right, I'm gonna go through a bunch of the different committees for folks that aren't aware on Wednesday. On 2 different days. The first day is all of the committee reports. The second day is the CMAC and the SEMSCO report. Med standards is a part of the CMAC, and then all those things go up to SEMSCO. I'm just gonna catch some highlights of the different things that are really relevant to EMS for the discussions up there. If you haven't looked at the governor's budget part R, please do that. Things that are really relevant, especially to this group. are that it's looking to extend the community paramedic program by 2 years. They want to make paramedics able to administer buprenorphine. They're looking at counties being responsible for EMS plans for their county, which would dovetail into regional plans. They want to update the definition of EMS. That actually came from NYSVERA, Onion, FASNY, and the Association of Counties, that definition from State Council, which is great. They're looking to make EMS an essential service. There isn't funding with this particular one. There's a lot of discussion about what that means, what that doesn't mean, but that's a piece of what's there. And then looking at licensure instead of certification for EMS providers. Licensure would come from the Commissioner of Health. Nothing would really change for people. They'd still have to do the CME program. They'd still have to keep up their ACLS and PALS and all that other kind of jazz. They would be considered licensed instead of certified, which has pros and cons with it as well. Let's see. Out of safety committee, they're working on the management of de-escalation tactics. From out of that committee, they're looking at a restraint tag also. Dr. Isaacs from FDNY is looking at that, or from New York City, sorry, FDNY. And safety and stretcher operations for agencies. In terms of quality metrics, they are looking at data quality and access. They've made some great strides actually in the this last meeting, working with the vendors to ensure that data is actually coming across in ways for the state to see it. And so they picked up a couple errors that were happening at the vendor level with image trend and are working to fix that. So it looks like data is actually potentially getting to the state. It just needs to be unscrambled a little bit. So that's good news. The EMS Innovations and Research tag with Dr. Redlener is looking at behavioral healthcare collaboration and crisis stabilization centers guidance. We do have one of those up in Poughkeepsie, and so it would be looking at what the guidance would be for people just to take folks straight there instead of going to a hospital first. There is ongoing work with the research committee and in looking at what agencies may need in terms of CLIA waivers from Wadsworth for the different tests that they do. We currently have to have a CLIA waiver for blood glucose monitoring. We talked about the iGel. The Med Standards Committee with Dr. Ravitch was also looking at the blood implementation package. The state has put that forward as an emergency package so that if it gets enacted, it'll go through the public comment period, but be enacted as it's going through the public comment period. And that's for blood products for ground providers. And then more will come with that as to rolling that bit of it out. They changed the dosing of TXA. They had it from 1 gram. They changed it to 2 grams. And that will go into these protocols that are being pushed out right now. And they're adding nebulized and racemic epinephrine to the medication formulary, and also what was the other one? Olanzapine, to make sure those things were in the formulary.
Yeah.
And so that all passed through. And I believe that was the big pieces of what came out of the CMAC.
Thanks. All right, new business. Having just talked about the dire straits of the program agency for the Regional EMS Council, we need a new Hudson Valley Medical Director for the Regional EMS Council. That's what I was doing before Dan took off. So that would be one of us. Any nominations?
Between you, I'm gonna hide in my newness.
What better with the one?
Who's not here
Huh?
today?
Yeah, everybody knows.
Don't make eye contact.
I can't nominate, so somebody else better nominate somebody. It's actually a rewarding thing. I did it for years. And, you know, you go to the REMSCO meetings, you're kind of apprised of everything that's going on at the REMSCO. It's a,
You have to give a report.
yes, report from the REMSCO.
It's usually a summary of this meeting and
Right.
Yeah,
RTAC
really.
meeting and the RTAC and everything else.
And it's not, the time commitment is not huge.
When does the REMSCO meeting tend to be?
Wednesday evening, 7 p.m.
How often?
Just like, yeah,
Quarterly meeting.
You guys, 5 times, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Four?
Right.
Four or five.
Is it four?
We do 6, but.
Going once?
So once the nominations go, the meeting can continue. I have nothing else on the agenda.
Is there somebody in the here to nominate?
And you can get an alternate too,
Yeah.
to go for you, you know, you just have to
Have a couple people do it.
negotiate that, and I'm sure by, you know, all the hands that are volunteering for this position, I'm sure you'll have no problem getting together in your place.
I'll second that.
We didn't say no, so go for it.
That makes sense.
Oh, wait, actually, I know his first. I take it back, I went to my second, I know his situation.
My wife,
His wife will.
she gave me the okay. If you guys want me to do it, I'll do it.
Yeah, there's
I've
no
been here since I
backseats
was
on nominations.
19, and Chris will tell you I looked like I was 12.
You did, it's true.
And now, 20 years later, I look like I'm 19.
Any day now.
You can balance out the hair follicles. Sure.
Quit bragging, Felice.
Yeah.
Where's my cane?
How many times did you guys pass this
That's
rule
next.
with the permit?
Doctor still now.
Yeah.
This job should make you look about it.
I really appreciate it.
When he accepts the nomination, just remember you're gonna have to find a evaluation chair.
That was on new business.
Okay. Can't hold two seats, that's all.
I'll accept the
Yeah.
nomination if you guys want me to, but. Does anybody else want?
Well, somebody else has to be the evaluation. You know, at the end of the day, we all kind of do everything together. So whoever ends up doing the evaluation subcommittee position, it's very collaborative. Anybody?
Well, I work a lot with Dr. Wolf, who has an EMS fellowship that he completed last year, so has some training in that.
Is that a nomination?
What do you think? Can you do that?
Awesome.
Just get it on record that they voted him in.
Yes. Do we even need a vote if there's one candidate? So,
Yeah.
can we do any objections? Any objections to Dr. Felice assuming the position of the medical director for the REMSCO and Dr. Wolf taking the position for the evaluation subcommittee? Hearing no objections, we move forward. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now I won't be alone up here anymore.
Oh, yeah, we'll sit on the other side now.
Yeah. Moving on up in the world.
That's the big difference.
That's all.
Okay, so next topic, final approval and vote on the 2025 RSI program update. If you guys have looked through, it was emailed, right? So if you guys looked through the packet, anybody have any questions about or comments? It looked great to me. I looked at it. Yeah, good job to both of you guys. I know that was a lot of work.
Years of our lives.
Yeah. Okay, so, if there's no discussion, do we need to do a roll call vote on that, or does it just have to be a regular, hearing no objections? Any objections to, this, update being approved? Hearing no objections, moving forward. It's official.
Well done.
Thanks, guys. Maybe we should clap to ourselves. Clap for them. It's all the work. All right. Credentialing policies and procedures. So the next big change, or big item for discussion, is there is a request to change the REMSCO's credentialing policies and procedures to mirror New York State's, in the sense that currently providers re-credentialing in our region can send in everything they need to re-credential the night before their packet is due, so to speak.
45 days, right?
Well, no. Now we want to make it forward.
So, no. So the credentialing manual states that the provider's renewal packets are due 45 days prior to their expiration. Their medical control contact hours, they have until the day that their card expires to get the region their missing hours. So what's going on is, so February 28th at, 10 p.m., I'm getting some person emailing me saying, oh, here's my last, 24 hours. And it's ridiculous. So we want to make it so that when you submit the renewal packet 45 days prior, everything has to be included. And Israel Knobloch is going to help me out here.
I will help Karen out. So until now, like Karen said, you had to give it in 45 days before. But if you didn't give it in 45 days before, nothing happened. So you were able to give it in the night before, or after the office left, you send it in and you said, oh, it was in at 10 p.m. before the 24 hours. So we had a discussion on the protocol committee, and we came up with some sort of solution to Karen's issue. And pretty much if you don't put it in 45 days before your deadline, then you have to wait 30 days. You're suspended at the end of your term, and you have to wait 30 days until you can take the exam again. And that will hopefully incentivize agencies and people to make sure that their hours are in on time. So that has to go through a motion to change the policy, if anybody has any comments.
So one of the things that we'd like to add to that is, and this is coming from the REMSCO and dealing with Karen. Currently, the policy says that you have to keep ACLS, PALS, and BLS cards valid throughout the duration. Everybody should understand that now the state has moved to 4-year certificates, and the AHA cards were there. What we want to do is, we're recommending that now it's not incumbent on the region to collect cards when they expire, but when they renew their packet, they have to submit copies of valid cards. So that means there could have been an expiration during the period, but as everybody knows, AHA cards are good for 5 years.
2 years.
Right, or 2 years, but the state is now requiring 4 years. And more importantly, just for discussion, there is absolutely zero way to enforce any of this. Okay, so I'm just gonna let the bad news out on the table right now. So we're gonna pass the policy, we're gonna say that this is the standard of the region, and if agency ABC says, have a great day, I'm not following it, there's no de-credentialing process. The region is not allowed to de-credential any provider from practicing within the state. The teeth had been, up until last week, that the REMAC had the authority to de-credential an agency's medical director. And then, in turn, the agency would have to go find a new medical director that would hopefully stay in line with what the REMAC protocols. As we learned, unfortunately, last week, it's nowhere in statute either. The REMAC has no authority to de-credential either a agency's medical director or a provider. The only thing that you can do is report them to the state, and then the state can make a decision whether that individual gets de-credentialed. But there is no authority in statute that allows the program agency, the medical, or the SEMSCO, or the REMAC to de-credential anybody.
So, I mean, you can petition the state, God forbid.
You can
get to
petition,
that.
and that's where it goes.
But if there is an unenforceable state standard that you have to keep your certifications for, AHA up, and they last 2 years, but the credentialing's 4 years, and it lapses, and someone gets into trouble, is there a liability issue if they have expired their ALS, BLS, and they
It's a
get called
great
to
question,
task?
Dr. Maurice, but unfortunately, there's nothing in statute that says that you have to have an ACLS, a PALS, or a BLS card valid during your certification.
Okay, and you don't think
As
that's
part of your re-credentialing process, you do,
in the re-credentialing, but yeah, but if
but
someone.
not continuous
If someone's
validation.
expired and called into court, would that be an issue, or could that be an issue?
So that would actually be up to your agency and
Yeah.
the agency's medical director. So if the agency medical director
Medical
said
directors.
people had to be in continuous practice and hold continuous certification,
Yeah.
then yes.
Okay,
Correct. It's the only person that can de-credential someone is the agency's medical director.
Right, but there's not a precedent that you were practicing without your credentials
No.
being up to date,
No.
and therefore you're
They
in
do it
trouble.
all the time.
No, but a lawyer would have a field day with it.
Right,
Sure,
so
yeah,
that's-
And then that falls back
it
on
doesn't
the
really
agency and
matter,
the
yeah.
It's gonna be
But
But at the
okay.
regional level, again, we would just like to get to the point where we're only collecting and regulating or going after agencies when they renew their credential.
Now, an agency medical director could have an MOU with the program agency to say that I want my folks to follow your credentialing process.
Yeah.
You could credential anybody all day long and make requirements and have the program agency be the one that follows whether they've done the things or not done the things. But then if they don't meet those requirements, it's gotta go back to the agency medical director to manage that individual.
Yeah.
It can't be the program agency that does it.
So we need a motion?
When would this be implemented, like, if we do it now, are there 50 medics that are gonna lose their card for a month, or?
You
There
could
would be
put in
nobody,
like
we would
a-
just stop
Yeah.
collect.
I mean, if we implement this now, this rule change now, where they have to get it in 45 days, is there anybody that falls in that gray zone that's gonna be in trouble?
I don't know, I was gonna ask you guys for a, like,
We can have a
when to
motion
start
If
this.
you do it 3 months from now, and
Yeah.
then everybody's got their.
Right, I'm not saying like, you know,
Yeah.
what? What happened?
Do it at 6 months before you furlough.
Yeah,
So, somebody wanna come up with a
There would-
motion
good
there?
answer, Bob.
It would-
Love you too.
This is where I would say you couldn't, I wouldn't recommend enacting this until July 1.
Yeah, it gives plenty of time for
This way
everybody
it
to
gives
kinda get
everybody 3
things.
months, that
Yeah.
gives plenty of time.
Get your
So
stuff
effective
together.
July 1, 2025.
Which is the protocol.
And we'll send out an advisory.
That would be my
So everybody can
recommendation.
see
So
it.
no one's getting stuck.
So what's the motion?
Motion to adopt this proposal for July 1st.
Second.
And that motion includes the 45-day,
Requirement.
Requirement.
For CME to be,
And hours.
medical content to be put in.
and ACLS cards,
Only need to be valid when they renew.
at the time of renewal.
So are the new cards saying you have 4 years on them, or we're just?
State cards?
Yeah,
State,
Okay.
state cards do.
Everything since July 1 of 2024 has been a 4-year certificate.
And then we'll do
So that's
July
why
1,
even on
send out
the-
an advisory.
Yeah.
Even on the
That's when the
credentialing
protocols come out.
required hours that we have, if you're operating on a 3-year card, it's still 24. If you're operating on a 4-year card, it went up to 32 hours of medical control physician contact time.
Do we want to, and this is a tiny point, but do we want to say that the medical cards only have to be valid at the time of renewal, but we encourage you to maintain certification at all times?
I would.
Yeah, let's put that verbiage in there just so that we're not endorsing letting your cards all run out 2 years into it.
You could save a year.
Yeah, exactly, that's, the requirement is you have to have it ready, but we do encourage you to maintain your certifications at all times.
Expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stronger than.
Course completion cards. Okay, moving along. Last item on new business is review of our QI guidelines, which we touched upon earlier. You wanna,
Yeah, so now that I've become agency medical director for several groups in the region, we've been going through our QI plans. This kind of, I say guidelines has come to my attention, haven't been updated since 2002. And so I think there are 2 big issues that I have with it in its current way that I think we can make better. So one of them is these guidelines really are pre-ECR. And a lot can be done to streamline some of this, so it's not necessarily as, I'll say, unnecessary and needless information entering, since so much data can be scrubbed just that way from run times, call volume, and from all of these other things. So that's one big, I think, improvement that we could do. The other is that we could digitize these forms entirely. There are forms that are due from every agency, it looks like twice a year, roughly. And, you know, as of right now, you print them out, you check off a bunch of stuff. And this could very easily become an online form, which would take significantly less time from the people doing this. Going through these forms, it sounds like we have other updates that need to happen as we're kind of updating the guidelines. And a few other just minor points about the number of people that are required to be on the QI committee. Having 5 people, 3 of which don't perform medical care, is actually very difficult for smaller agencies.
Is that defined by statute?
I believe it's defined in our 3006 that it has to have at least a minimum of 5 people.
Oh, what about
3
the 3?
non-medical, that's,
Or three non-providers.
Yeah.
Yeah, your program, according to Article 30, 3006 says your committee must be at least 5 members, 3 of whom do not participate in the provision of care by that service. 1 shall be a physician, and others shall be a nurse, emergency medical technicians, or advanced medical technicians. So that has to.
Somewhere else. But there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to make this process a little bit easier.
So, I guess the question is, should we have a whole subcommittee and we just to review these guidelines, our own QI guidelines over the next month or two? A tag, so to speak. And
the only delay with redoing these is that we're waiting to see if the governor approves Part R, because that's going to change how we would reevaluate these guidelines. Because according to the new Part R, they're going to do an agency scoring that the DOH is going to follow every time the agency has to renew. And we would have to want to include that into it.
what does that do?
So the agency scoring, the MCOS, is kind of like an ISO rating for agencies. And so if people are doing quality improvement in their agencies and regionally, then they would get a higher score than if they weren't doing it. I don't know if we need to include that into the plan, whether they have a decent score or not, but I think it's a good idea to create a tag and then have recommendation come out of the tag for all these things. It's gonna take a little while anyway, and so since the governor's budget is due April 1st, I can't imagine the tag's gonna have an answer before that.
We're pretty efficient here.
That
We'd
is
have
true.
it done by
That
tomorrow.
is true.
Does anybody else want to serve on it besides
I'm happy to serve.
myself? Dr. Wolf?
I wouldn't mind jumping on.
Awesome. Yeah,
I,
write all that down.
trying to Bob, Dr. Wolf, who else?
Rich and
Oh,
Dave.
Rich is on everything.
Clarify
Who else?
the date.
Who else? Anybody else? I got Bob, David, Violante, Dr. Wolf, Rich Willie.
That was Violante spelled G-R-A-S.
No.
That's so weird that I wrote that.
It was not.
All right,
Anybody else? Going once, going twice? No? Okay.
so we'll set something up. Get that going. Open forum.
You have to read this thing today. Did you read this? It's on your paper though.
Oh. Is this under open forum, or should it have
I don't
been
know.
earlier?
It's,
Just as an FYI, the town of Newburgh EMS will begin to carry ANSEF. So,
give me that.
from our discussion about, and now I'm assuming that's for open fractures, is
Yes.
that the, okay.
Okay.
Any other, open forum? Anybody has anything they wanna bring up? Speak now. Hold your peace for 3 months. All right, you get a motion? Second. Thanks, everybody. When's next meeting? June?
I don't know.
June 2nd.
June 2nd?
Thank you.
All right.
Hopefully, when it's warmer.
Thanks, everyone.